You know, folks, there are some things in life that you just can't make up. And if you wanted to make a case that God himself had just intervened to destroy a Russian nuclear fleet, you could hardly do better than the events that have transpired over the past 24 hours. And even if you don't believe in God, before you shut off the video, what you should consider is that even if you don't believe in God, the main subjects at stake in this video do, which is Russia and the United States. And that is going to impact those populations' interpretations of what has just happened in eastern Russia, and therefore will impact the steps they choose to take next. What I'm talking about, of course, is the series of natural disasters that have occurred in very rapid succession just outside Russia's most important nuclear base in the entire Pacific region. First, an earthquake, then a tsunami, and then a volcanic eruption just to the north, affecting the nuclear base that Russia needs if it wants to threaten the United States with nuclear warfare, because this is the base that Russia uses to have nuclear activity throughout the Pacific Ocean, and in particular around Alaska and the regions where it is closest to the United States. And the details of this you just cannot make up. First of all, if you look at a seismic map, you will see that surrounding basically the little bay where this Russian nuclear base is located, tons of different red dots of different earthquakes that have recently occurred in the past 2 days surrounding this area, which have created not just tsunamis, but also recurrent storm surges type waves that are not quite tsunami level, but quite large still, helping to accentuate any damage that has potentially come from tsunami waves. And we'll talk about those details in just a minute. But what is extremely funny about this whole circumstance is that just before it happened, Russia was trying to threaten the United States because of Donald Trump's ultimatum being moved up from 50 days to 10 days for Vladimir Putin to end the war. And on Russian state TV, they were talking about their grievances against the United States and how it was their right to retake Alaska from the United States, and how one day they would. And just after they made these statements is when this flurry of earthquakes began to happen around this Russian naval base, causing a tsunami that potentially has deleted the strategic significance of this base if it hasn't deleted some of their actual capabilities. In a moment, I'm going to look at the damage that has potentially been done to this nuclear fleet in Kamchatka, as well as the strategic significance of all of that. But before I do that, I want to touch on probably one of the more important aspects of this analysis that a lot of people are going to miss the significance of, which is that spiritual aspect that I alluded to at the beginning of this video. Because what you have to realize is that what is going on in terms of the natural disaster that occurred here is that this was a record-setting event, or at least an event that is historically noteworthy, with a magnitude 8.8 earthquake occurring just outside this nuclear naval base, which is the 6th largest earthquake in recorded history. And when it comes to people like the Russian Orthodox Church, this is extremely significant, because one of the things that they are trained to look for is signals that God is moving and making decisions through natural disasters and natural events. And that is potentially going to impact the psychology of a lot of Russian people who subscribe to that faith and how they feel about God's favor on Russia and this war. That aspect should not be overlooked. The Russian Orthodox Church, of course, in particular, is a very superstitious branch of Christianity. This is the branch of Christianity that not very long ago allowed Rasputin to kind of come into their ranks. And Russian Orthodox people very much were influenced by Rasputin and this mysticism and this spirituality, looking for significance in rather mundane events and basically being deceived by Rasputin because of that proclivity. And on the other side of the ocean, people in the United States also believe in God, and they believe that God works through natural disasters and natural events. And that is very significant when we get into the strategic analysis, because what at least appears to have happened from the way a religious person will interpret this event is that God has intervened on behalf of the United States against Russia. Now again, I don't want you to miss the importance of this. What you have to realize is that for Russia, in their information war against the United States, one of the primary tools that they have always been leaning on is religion. To get the United States to stop supporting Ukraine, Russia has tried to make a moral case that they are a morally superior country to the West. And a lot of people in the United States have believed that. They have believed, for example, propaganda spread by Tucker Carlson, who has said that the Russian Orthodox Church is being persecuted by Ukraine. And a lot of people have really come to see the war in Ukraine as a spiritual war that has caused some people to support Russia within the United States. And even if they don't support Russia, it has caused them to be very leery of supporting Ukraine. And for people who believe in God, it is important for them to realize that when you are interpreting a natural disaster event like this event is very clearly, as I said, not in Russia's favor, but very much in favor of the United States, as it is finally taking decisive action against Russia. That is going to be used, I promise you, to influence the narrative, right or wrong, on how this war is approached. And a lot of people in the United States will see God's hand in this event, and that will influence a lot of people in the United States, particularly on the right that has been more opposed to giving aid to Ukraine, to say, well, this is obviously the direction that we're being pushed. And on the other hand, it is going to be very hard for the Kremlin to control that narrative within their own country. And even now we already see, to a large degree, the Kremlin trying not to draw attention to this event in whatever way possible, trying their best not to release specifics and information, but really just trying to have these news headlines subside so that the Russian people don't start thinking too critically about what has actually happened here. Just in case you think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, when it comes to Russia, they really have used these religious aspects to support their campaign of aggression, to the point that they have actually created a special Russian Orthodox Church cathedral to honor the fallen heroes who have died in Russia's historical wars, including the war in Ukraine. And there are paintings in this church depicting Russia's history as this religious crusade, and that those who die for Russia are basically dying in the name of God. And this is, of course, owing back to Russia's history as an empire, where Russia was a very religious empire, where the Tsar misused religion to say that he was appointed by God to rule the country, and used that to justify all kinds of evils and basically to justify unlimited expansion, a narrative that Russia has still failed to drop. So now let's set aside natural disasters and religion and the psychological aspects of all of that and how that influences the narrative. And let's focus on what has actually happened with these natural disasters and why it is so strategically significant. And there's somebody who's already made a video on this that is going to go in a lot more detail, which is Jason Smart, who really covers all the reasons why Russia's Navy has, at the very least in the minds of its opponents, been critically paralyzed. And just that sitting in the minds of the opponents is a big enough deal. Of course, a huge tsunami wave hitting a Russian naval base is going to damage docking facilities. It is going to damage potentially the ships themselves and potentially lock the ships in to prevent them from getting out or from getting back into the bay if they are already out on missions. And if that strands part of the Russian nuclear fleet, they are not going to be able to resupply with food or fuel, food being the main factor there, though. And that is really going to limit the operational capabilities of this fleet, because there are really not many other options for them to go to. The reason that this port was here, even though it was so vulnerable to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and things like that, was because it was some of the only strategic territory where Russia could put a port in this region. It needs to have water that is deep enough and a port that is sheltered enough, all of those good things. And it really does seem like the most likely scenario is that there has been some significant damage that has been done here. For one, when we look at the video footage of waves that have hit other regions of Kamchatka, of course we don't have video footage of the naval base because Russia is really going to tightly control that and not want to release any information about that. But when we look at the waves that have flooded areas that are further away from the epicenter of this earthquake than this Russian naval base is, we see massive flooding and massive disasters where if we put that to where the naval base is, we see that that would cause some serious damage. And even worse, the geography of where the naval base is specifically is more prone to more serious waves due to the way it's been explained to me, I think is the slope of the ocean floor there. And so what we see is really a high potential situation where the Russian fleet has probably been damaged, potentially beyond repair, for quite some time. So why does that matter? Why is that a big deal? Well, first and foremost, this is not the only aspect of Russia's nuclear triad that has been damaged. Ukraine recently did Operation Spiderweb, where they took out a huge portion of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. And in order to have really a functional nuclear deterrent, what a country needs is the ability to launch missiles from the land, from air, and from sea so that you have strategic redundancy, so that if any or two of those aspects go down, you still have the third option, and that ensures that your nuclear threat stays valid against other countries. We know, of course, that the primary tool that Russia has used against the United States throughout the war is nuclear propaganda, basically saying, if you intervene, we are going to nuke you. And actually, what's kind of funny is Russia has also threatened super weapons that can create things like earthquakes and tsunamis. Gee, the irony of that is just kind of crazy. And so what we see is at this moment where Russia is trying to rehash its nuclear threats to kind of cause the United States to back down as Trump delivers Russia this ultimatum. The ability for Russia to make nuclear ultimatums has literally been removed from the map, and specifically the ability for them to make nuclear ultimatums against the United States. Because even if they do have missiles that are still capable of hitting the US, they have lost the ability to project confidence that they still have strategic redundancy. These nuclear threats, of course, were very effective for many years of the war. They really scared a lot of people. Going back to the propaganda narratives, a lot of people picked this up to say the United States was crazy for wanting to support Ukraine. And now that narrative has been deleted at the exact time the United States finally seems to be taking, for the first time, especially under Trump, serious action to help support Ukraine. What we see then is Russia's two main propaganda tools against the United States, religious justification and nuclear threats, have been removed at the same time. I have argued in the past that these propaganda narratives that Russia has used are really the main reason they're still in the war at all, and that if these propaganda narratives weren't successful and Ukraine had managed to get all the aid they should have gotten, they probably would have defeated Russia by now, or at least they'd be very close to that. And now what we see is in one moment, with one event, one record-setting earthquake, both of these propaganda narratives have been destroyed, and the religious justification and the nuclear threats are both far less relevant today than they were yesterday. That is probably going to have an impact on the US's ability and desire to support Ukraine and actually take meaningful action against Russia. At least that's what I would anticipate, although I know Russia is going to fight back against that in whatever way they can. Now, one more aspect of this that will have a lot more details in a video that I'll release in a couple of days is how Russia's nuclear deterrent has not just been lost against the United States, but it has also been lost against China. And again, while I'll give more details in my upcoming video, there is a theory that China for a long time has been eyeballing territories in Russia's Far East as Russia gets progressively weaker from its war against Ukraine. And the main reason China has not done that is because of the possibility of Russia having a nuclear deterrent in this area. With this naval base going down, or at least there not being confidence that it's still standing, Russia's nuclear threat in the region now looks the lowest it has been in a very long time, which means this does create windows of opportunity that China may want to leverage with reduced chances for strategic failure And even if that doesn't happen, that is something that Russia still has to now prepare for and invest more resources in, while they are also investing resources in getting this nuclear base back up to be fully functioning. However, no matter how you slice it and no matter how Russia tries to spin it, it is very clear that while you are having a massive war in your west, it is not good news when one of your primary bases in the east is hit by a magnitude 8.8 earthquake, followed by a tsunami and a volcanic eruption in the area. That's all for this one, guys, but before you go, could I ask you for a quick favor? On my last video, YouTube only paid me a quarter of the revenue that I normally get for my videos, and I don't know if that's going to become a trend. I sure hope not, but that is why I increasingly rely on support from you guys in my community. So if you enjoyed this video, if you appreciated the insights I brought to the table, would you consider supporting the channel? If you want to do so, there are a lot of links in the description by which you can do so. And again, I hope this is not a trend with YouTube giving me less revenue for the videos that I put a lot of work into, but we'll see. And either way, I know that this community is going to keep this channel going, so I'm not worried about it. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys on the next one.